Human diplomat shocks the galaxy, we're joining the war. HFY sci-fi story. The war had raged across the galaxy for decades. The Zal'Nar, a race of highly advanced insectoid beings, had swept through countless systems, subjugating entire species with their terrifying technology and relentless military prowess. No one had dared challenge them, until now. In the midst of the chaos, the Galactic Council, a body formed of the most influential races from across the stars, had desperately sought solutions. Diplomats, strategists, and military commanders from hundreds of species had come together to discuss their future. The council meetings were tense, filled with negotiations and long, drawn-out speeches about peace, survival, and desperate measures. Yet, none had spoken with any real conviction about standing against the Zal'Nar. That was, until the humans arrived. The humans, who had once been considered a backwater species on the edge of the galaxy, had become something more in the last century, rapidly advancing technologically and militarily. They had earned a reputation as both fierce warriors and diplomatic masterminds. Their small population had been a thorn in the side of the Zal'Nar ever since they'd first made contact. And now, it was their time. The human diplomat, Ambassador James Drayton, stood at the podium in the heart of the council chamber. His uniform was simple, yet striking, a dark blue suit adorned with the insignia of the United Earth Federation, his country's government. His face was calm, composed, but his eyes gleamed with a fire that the other delegates could feel even from across the vast room. The chamber fell silent as Drayton began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Galactic Council," he said, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made every word hang in the air. "For far too long, we've watched as the Zal'Nar have taken what they wanted. We've begged, pleaded, and tried to negotiate with them. We've sent ambassadors, generals, and emissaries, hoping for some spark of reason to break through their hunger for conquest." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Species that had once been proud now whispered about their looming extinction, the Zal'Nar's overwhelming presence a constant threat to their survival. "But I stand before you today to say one thing," Drayton continued, his voice rising. "Humanity has had enough. We are not your saviors. We are not here to offer empty promises of peace. We are here to tell you that we're joining the war." A gasp echoed through the room. Delegates from every species present turned to one another in shock, their minds racing. The humans had always been unpredictable, but this was unprecedented. "You heard me right," Drayton said, his gaze sweeping across the room. "For years, we've held back, waiting for the right moment. We've studied the Zal'Nar's tactics, we've analyzed their weaknesses, and we've been preparing. Our fleets are ready, our armies are ready, and we will fight alongside you, not as subordinates, but as equals." The room was a maelstrom of whispers. The council had never seen such defiance. For so long, they'd been cowed by the might of the Zal'Nar, afraid to anger them. Now, the humans, who had only just begun to establish themselves as a galactic power, were offering to turn the tide. "Do you realize what you're saying, Ambassador?" The voice came from Delegate Rail, a towering figure from the Faraki, a species known for their long lives and cautious approach to diplomacy. "The Zal'Nar have already crushed entire fleets. They annihilate entire worlds in days. And you, humans, are just going to throw yourselves into this war? You don't even understand the scope of what you're facing." Drayton met Rail's eyes with unwavering resolve. "I understand it better than you think. My people, our people, have faced threats before. We've survived, adapted, and fought. It's in our blood. You may not have the stomach for this, but we do, and together, we can turn the tide." The murmurs grew louder. The members of the council were torn. Some saw the humans' audacity as a gamble they couldn't afford, others as a beacon of hope they'd been yearning for. But Drayton wasn't finished. "And one more thing," he said, voice quiet but sharp. "If we win this war, we will not go back to the way things were. No more subjugation, no more weak alliances formed out of fear. The galaxy will be a place where the strong stand together, not because they fear destruction, but because they choose to fight for each other. Humanity stands for that. We stand for that future." The words hit like a thunderclap. The room was silent, save for the hum of the chamber's ancient machinery. The human diplomat had said what no one else had dared. He had spoken not only of war but of a vision for the future, a future where unity and strength meant something greater than survival. Rail finally spoke, his voice much quieter now. Perhaps we can use your help after all. One by one, other delegates nodded, some reluctantly, others with growing enthusiasm. The humans had lit a spark of defiance, of unity, of hope, and it was contagious. Drayton smiled, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a species that had fought for everything it had. The war has begun, he said, and we are ready. The council chamber erupted into applause. Humanity had shocked the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Human diplomat shocks the galaxy, we're joining the war. HFY Sci-Fi story continued. The days following Ambassador Drayton's announcement were a whirlwind. The Galactic Council had reluctantly, but overwhelmingly, agreed to join forces with humanity. Though the Zalanar had been a nearly unstoppable force, the humans brought something no one else could, their relentless resolve. Even the most skeptical delegates, who had initially dismissed humanity's involvement as nothing more than bravado, were now beginning to realize the potential of this new alliance. The United Earth Federation wasted no time. Within hours of the Council's vote, fleets of human warships, sleek and agile in their design, began to arrive in various systems across the galaxy. These ships, though smaller than the imposing dreadnoughts of the Zalanar, were swift, heavily armed, and equipped with a new kind of technology, an energy shielding system that had been developed secretly by the Federation's top engineers, capable of absorbing and redirecting massive amounts of energy. It was the key to countering the Zalanar's devastating plasma cannons. The human fleets began training alongside the forces of the allied species, many of which had never fought a coordinated war before. But the humans were different, they had fought wars for centuries, and each generation was born into conflict, trained for battle since childhood. What had been learned from their brutal history was being passed on now, not as mere tactics, but as a philosophy of survival. Drayton had become a symbol, a living embodiment of the human will to resist. He continued to make speeches, not just in the chambers of the Galactic Council, but to the soldiers, the civilians, and the refugees scattered across the war-torn systems. His words weren't just calls to arms, they were calls to unity. Humanity, once a fledgling species, was showing the galaxy what it meant to stand up and fight for something greater than oneself. The battle at Zoran 6. It wasn't long before the humans' involvement in the war proved its worth. The first major test came when the Zalanar launched an attack on the Zoran 6 system, a key trade hub that had been held by a fragile alliance of various species, including the Felshura and the Orvith. The Felshura, a bird-like race, had once been feared as natural warriors, but after decades of peace, they had grown complacent. The Orvith, a race of aquatic beings, had little experience with ground combat. The Zalanar were poised to overrun the system with their signature brutal efficiency. The human fleet arrived just as the first Zalanar battlecruisers breached the system's outer defenses. Ambassador Drayton's words echoed in the minds of the Allied commanders, "We fight not for ourselves, but for the future of all our species." The humans' tactics were unconventional, but they worked. Instead of relying on brute force to break the enemy's lines, the human commanders used their superior speed and adaptability. They launched a series of hit-and-run attacks, drawing the Zalanar into traps using decoy ships and creating false retreats to lure them into preset ambush zones. Human engineers deployed devastating new weaponry, from magnetic railguns that tore through Zalanar shields to gravity disruptors that forced the massive enemy ships to stall mid-flight. In the thick of the battle, human ground forces took to the surface of Zoran 6. These soldiers, some of the best trained in the galaxy, used their advanced combat exoskeletons and explosive plasma rifles to secure key points around the planet's atmosphere, keeping the Zalanar from overwhelming the planetary defenses. The fight on the ground was brutal, but the humans were relentless. Human soldiers did not know the meaning of surrender, unlike many of their allies, who had been taught to negotiate or fall back in the face of overwhelming odds. Humans were built for survival. They held their positions, and where they couldn't, they struck back harder. They fought for every inch of ground. By the end of the battle, the Zalanar fleet was in retreat, their forces shattered by the combined might of the humans and their allies. The victory was not just military, it was psychological. The Zalanar, who had previously seen all races as beneath them, now had a very real threat to contend with: humanity. The turning point. As the days passed and more battles were fought, it became clear that the tide of the war was shifting. The human forces had quickly adapted to the intricacies of galactic warfare. The Federation's intelligence officers, working alongside the brightest minds from across the galaxy, had begun deciphering Zal-NAR tactics and using them against their creators. The human contributions weren't just on the battlefield, they were in the diplomatic rooms as well. While the Council had been bogged down in endless debates, the humans moved with a purpose. Drayton had not only built an army, he had built alliances, woven together a network of resistance movements, and inspired each species to fight in a way that played to their strengths. More and more species joined the fight, emboldened by humanity's example. The once divided factions that had long feared the Zal-NAR found themselves working together in ways that had seemed impossible just months before. The galaxy was uniting, not just to survive, but to win. A new era. The war didn't end in a single decisive battle. The Zal-NAR, realizing the shift in momentum, tried to regroup, launching more desperate and brutal offensives. But humanity, alongside their new allies, proved more than capable of holding their ground. With each victory, humanity's reputation grew. And Drayton? He continued to lead with unyielding courage, speaking not just of the battles won, but of a future where the galaxy was no longer divided by fear. He spoke of a future where every species stood as equals, united by a common goal, the preservation of all life. At the final meeting of the Galactic Council, as the last remnants of the Zal-NAR Empire crumbled, Drayton stood once more before the representatives of the galaxy's greatest species. "We did this together," he said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of 1,000 worlds. "This victory is not just ours, but the beginning of something far greater. No longer will we be divided. We've seen what we can accomplish when we fight together. This is the dawn of a new era. The galaxy will no longer be ruled by fear. It will be ruled by the strength of its people, united." And with those words, the galaxy stood on the precipice of a new age, a human age, an age of unity, strength, and a shared will to protect the future of all. Human Diplomat shocks the galaxy. We're joining the war. HFY Sci-Fi story continued. The last stand at Epsilon 9. Months had passed since the victory at Zoran 6, but the Zal-NAR were not the type to bow easily. Their hive-mind mentality, their unrelenting thirst for conquest, and their terrifying technological superiority made them the most fearsome enemy the galaxy had ever faced. But now, as they regrouped in the distant Epsilon 9 system, it was clear that the end of their reign was near. The Zal-NAR had taken refuge in the heart of a dense asteroid field, using its natural defenses to shield themselves from the ever-encroaching human and allied fleets. They believed they had found the perfect hiding place, a place where they could reorganize and launch a final, devastating counteroffensive. They were wrong. The Galactic Alliance, led by humanity, had already anticipated this. It was no secret that the Zal-NAR were running out of resources. Their supply lines had been disrupted, and their ships, once feared for their sheer power, were now showing signs of wear. The combined forces of the humans, Felshura, Orvith, and others had slowly, relentlessly, chipped away at the Zal-NAR's dominance. Every fleet battle had been another nail in the coffin of their empire. And now, the final confrontation was at hand. Ambassador James Drayton stood on the bridge of the USS Valor, the human flagship, watching the viewscreen as the massive Epsilon 9 system unfolded before him. The asteroid field was dense, dark, and foreboding, but the human fleet had a plan, a bold, risky one. "Prepare the fleet," Drayton's voice rang out, sharp and clear. "We move in 10 minutes. This ends today." He could feel the weight of his decision, the weight of the moment. The galaxy had changed since the humans entered the war. They had become not just fighters, but leaders, symbols of unity in a universe that had long been divided. And now, they were about to deal the final blow to the Zal-NAR. The battle begins. The human fleet, along with their allies, entered the asteroid field under the cover of their advanced cloaking technology. They moved as one, a single cohesive unit, their ships maneuvering with precision and purpose. The Zal-NAR, blind to the approaching threat, continued to fortify their position. "Now," Drayton ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. With that command, a barrage of missiles shot from the human ships, piercing the darkness of the asteroid field. The ZALNAR fleet's scanners went wild, registering an unknown threat coming from all directions. The first wave of missiles hit their defenses hard, causing a chain reaction that set off explosions within the ZALNAR's main supply depot. The surprise was complete. The ZALNAR fleet, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, but the humans had planned for this. Using their superior speed and tactics, they struck quickly, knowing they had only one shot to succeed. On the surface of Epsilon 9, the ground forces had already begun their assault. Human marines, supported by Felshera and Orvith soldiers, stormed the surface, breaching the ZALNAR defenses with overwhelming force. The battle on the planet was brutal, rocky, unforgiving terrain that became a deadly battlefield. But humanity's experience in guerrilla warfare, honed in their own wars and perfected during the galactic conflict, proved invaluable. They fought like no other species could, pushing forward inch by inch, their resolve unwavering. A moment of defiance. In the heart of the asteroid field, the human ships faced the final wave of ZALNAR forces. Their ships, massive and intimidating, began to coalesce in an attempt to strike back with overwhelming force. The ZALNAR Queen's flagship, a gargantuan vessel made of twisted alloys and shifting energy fields, emerged from the depths of the field, its weapons aimed directly at the human fleet. Drayton knew this was the last test. It was do or die. All ships, he commanded, engage at maximum power, for the galaxy. The USS Valor surged forward, its powerful engines cutting through the field as it led the charge. Human ships followed suit, weaving through the asteroid field with agility and precision that the ZALNAR could not match. The enemy fired their massive plasma beams, but the humans were ready. The new energy shields, developed through years of research, absorbed the blasts, sending them back at the attacking ships with deadly force. The battle was chaotic, with explosions rocking the field as ZALNAR ships were torn apart by the sheer force of human firepower. But amidst the chaos, the human fleet pressed forward, relentless in their mission. And then, the moment came. The ZALNAR Queen's flagship opened fire, a massive shot that could have obliterated any fleet in its path. But the Valor wasn't just any ship. Its shields flared brightly, deflecting the blast before the ship's advanced weapons unleashed their fury. In a final act of defiance, the human fleet's combined firepower focused on the ZALNAR Queen's ship. The flagship exploded in a burst of energy, its death echoing through the battlefield like the final toll of a bell. The ZALNAR had been defeated. A new beginning. With the fall of the ZALNAR Queen and their flagship, the remaining ZALNAR forces scattered, their hive mind fractured without the guiding presence of their leader. The battle for Epsilon 9, once thought impossible to win, had been decisively claimed by humanity and their allies. The victory was not just a military triumph, it was a statement. The galaxy had been forever changed. No longer would the ZALNAR's shadow loom over the stars. Humanity had shown the galaxy that when they united, when they fought for each other, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. As the human fleet gathered to celebrate their victory, Ambassador Drayton stood alone on the observation deck of the Valor, staring out at the stars. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. He knew that peace would not come easily. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope. The galaxy was no longer a fractured collection of species, each isolated, each fighting for their own survival. It was united, a shining example of what could be achieved when the many stood together as one. And in that unity, humanity had found its true place in the galaxy. The war is over, Drayton said quietly to himself. Now, we build. The galaxy had a future, and humanity would be at its heart.